Good evening, and welcome to our continuing series, Explorations in Savitri, with our brother Alok. Namaste. We are continuing with Book 2, the Book of the Traveler of the Worlds. We're on page 222, at the break. The world of falsehood, the mother of evil, and the sons of darkness.
So what we are reading through this canto is particularly the how of the night, not the why. The why comes much later in different sections of the book, but how the night came into being and the mother of evil, how it has come, how it was born, this adversary nature. So this is what we are reading, and it starts with, when nothing was save matter without soul, and a spiritless hollow was the heart of time. Then life first touched the insensible abyss, awaking the stark void to hope and grief. Her pallid beams smote the unfathomed night, in which God hid himself from his own view. So it starts from that point where matter has already come into existence. Matter is nothing but a condensation and crystallization of the spirit itself. And the inconscient is there, which has given space for the play, the divine play. It's the stage. But when life comes, because matter must now begin to aspire, matter is meant to grow divine. So we have Sri Aurobindo's ascending triangle, matter aspires through life, light and love. So the first power that comes is life. And life comes to awaken matter. But what is hid inside matter is the dark abyss. It is right behind, and it cries for expression. It says, I too am there. So it's not just a question of emergence of living forms, living beings, but more importantly, the awakening of darkness, which is hidden behind. But two things very interesting. One is that Sri Aurobindo says that in this darkness, God is hidden. So that's the great assurance and the promise. The other thing is, when life goes to awaken matter, what comes awake through matter is the dark, fathomless night. So it wakes up to life. It becomes living. And Mother speaks of that before life and before mind came into existence, the inconscient was not so bad. It was very plastic. You could work upon it. She says, several times I have gone into it. But as life and mind came, it became living. It became more mentalized, and that became very difficult. We can take the example of the first machines which mankind made. They were very simple. They, probably the bicycle or clock, things like that. But now, as the machines grow more and more conscious, there is a visible danger. The same machine, there is the famous book Rise of the Machines, because when they begin to become conscious, they are conscious in the way of the machine, not in the way of the intelligence which has created them. So it's a phase. So the first thing that comes to life is the darkness which is hidden in matter. And it uses the same energy of matter to build a form for itself. That's what we'll see being described. In all things, she sought their slumbering mystic truth. This about life. She is the life. The unspoken word that inspires unconscious forms. She groped in his deeps for an invisible law, fumbled in the dim subconscient for his mind, and strove to find a way for spirit to be. This is the work for which life has come. We will see it, in other cantos also. that when life came and entered into matter, so it wants to look for the true law. Life is a power of the divine. So it has entered into matter and is struggling to make the spirit emerge out. So for it to emerge, it must know how the spirit wants to express itself through various forms. So it's looking for the divine law which is concealed. So this is the search of life. And in the process, it plunges into the subconscious. But from the night, another answer came. This becomes the problem.
The darkness.
The darkness.
Yes.
A seed was in that nether matrix cast, a dumb, unprobed husk of perverted truth, a cell of an insentient infinite. Now it's very interesting. Now, what is this seed? This seed can come from nowhere except the divine. So these are the four great powers which Mother has spoken of, which have plunged into the night. But they become like little tiny seeds surrounded by the husk. It's like the seed which is inside the soil, surrounded by the hard layer of the crust.
And that's the perverted truth.
That's the perverted truth. So that will come out first
Yes.
in the process of emergence. It's the same thing we see. I mean, before the beautiful rose blooms, you have the thorns. So that comes. And it serves a purpose, but that will be for later. So it's insentient, but it's infinite. It's truth, but it is perverted. So it just twists truth a little bit, tweaks it, and therefore it changes its entire sense. A monstrous birth prepared its cosmic form in nature's titan embryo, ignorance. Then, in a fatal and stupendous hour, something that sprang from the stark, inconscient sleep, unwillingly begotten by the mute void, lifted its ominous head against the stars, overshadowing earth with its huge body of doom. It chilled the heavens with the meanness of a face. So it springs from darkness. So it has a natural tendency to love darkness. It has a natural tendency to oppose light. It has a natural tendency to pull everything back into the darkness. So all the forms that begin to emerge, they emerge under the pressure of this darkness, which is right there. Now behind darkness, we have been told God is hidden there, but that comes later. Right now, this form comes and claims not only the earth, but even the heavens. How does it claim the heaven? Because gods are working here. So they are suddenly met with a challenge. Now there is the sense that as if it was not exactly what should have happened. This is the sense here. And when Mother was asked these questions, she says, well, if you see from the other side, then you can call it a play and you can understand and see the purpose. But she says it ought not to have happened. But nevertheless, it has happened. So the question that concerns us now is, what should we do next? So that's a very pragmatic question. It has happened. It shouldn't have happened. Nature should have blossomed under the divine beauty, just like a flower opens to the sun. Now Sri Aurobindo tells us why this happened. Ultimately, in the highest divine wisdom, there was a reason, and that also we'll see. But all this pain and suffering did come into existence.
And yet when Mother went down into the inconscient, she found a new world.
Yes, because it's hidden there.
Yes.
And there are many reasons why it has come, and I am resisting the temptation to speak about it now because let it be the proper time. Right now, let's know about this chilling, menacing face, shadowy face, which is just the opposite. It's the shadow of the divine. So it has all the things, sense of infinity, sense of eternity, the sense of power, even a kind of knowledge which works within it, but it works in a opposite way. A nameless power, a shadowy will arose. Look at this power with a capital P and will with a capital W.
Yes.
It's just powerful. It's not just, it's just the shadow of that will. It can oppose, immense and alien to our universe. That's why you will see that as long as there is just the material creation, of course there are tsunamis and there are, earthquakes. But real perverse creation begin to emerge with life. There are plants which will suck in and trap and deception, where they actually suck in it. They will attract a living creature and then put it inside, and then suddenly they will swallow it. There are plants like that, parasites. Then again you see insects, this whole world which has come from, which is a distortion and perversion, and they have all come into existence. But as long as you see just material nature, there is still a harmony and beauty which is maintained.
And that is what Mother tells us.
Yes.
That harmony is the basis of all.
Yes, basis.
Yeah.
In the inconceivable purpose, none can gauge. So here he has used that there is a purpose, but it cannot be conceived by the human mind. One of them is that since the divine is infinite, within the infinity there are all possibilities, including the possibility of opposing and negating itself. So that is one. Why is it allowed? Well, let's have the cat out of the bag, because ultimately it ends up enriching the creation. That also we'll see, how it does that. A vast non-being robed itself with shape. Now this non-being again is not the same non-being which is used when Sri Aurobindo refers to the non-being who is above, being and non-being. So there is the non-being which one meets above. Now that non-being is the Parabrahman from whom being is emerged. So that is the non-being. It's also called as non-being. But here the non-being is which denies the being. It would not allow anything to come into existence. It denies existence. It denies everything. So in that sense it's a non-being.
And it's the essence of the thing.
Yes.
And when I asked Nalini about these capitals,
Yes.
he said, that's the essence of it.
Yes.
So this is a non-being with capital N and B.
Yes. It is using the same thing. So up above, if you go beyond Sachidanand, there is the state of non-being.
Yeah.
You can't speak of any being there. Same thing here. There is no being.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it's a non-being robed itself with shape. The boundless nescience of the unconscious depths covered eternity with nothingness. Again we see the nothingness. Not the higher shunyam, but the nothingness of the inconscient.
And covered eternity.
Yes. A seeking mind replaced the seeing soul. Life grew into a huge and hungry death. The spirit's bliss was changed to cosmic pain. So this is how we see that with the entry of life, with the entry of mind, the straight and sunlit blossoming, that changes into something where there is a lot of struggle, where there is a lot of pain, not the direct blossoming through the soul. In fact, this is how she experiences when she went into the state of unconsciousness in which people were there, sitting around her. Mm-hmm. And she enters that why they are so unconscious. Why don't they want to understand what I am revealing to them. And then she entered, and that's how she entered into the inconscient, through that door. And then she experienced that how the mental action of the mind in the inconscient has made it so rigid, so hard. Because see, the moment mind acts, it gives a precise form. It likes to do that. Then it differentiates this versus that. So either an or is born. And then it fixes a meaning in the mind. It defines things and thereby destroys it. Limits it, at least for sure. Whereas the divine is infinite. So the action of the mind on the inconscient tends to make it very hard and rigid. And that's why she says those who approach it with the mind, they have the greatest difficulties. And there are those simple people who just approach through the psychic. And that's the most beautiful way. In fact, she says the animals and plant life will open first, which at least I am convinced about it, because when I go around the ashram, I meet a very interesting sight, especially at night. Though I meet, you will see this sight all the time. I see the dogs who are outside are in trance.
Yes.
Beautifully. But human beings are chattering. They are sitting outside and talking about all the things going on in the world. So I wonder, these dogs are so receptive. They are just all in a state of blissful trance.
And each has his place.
They've forgotten that place, and they've forgotten their instincts. And yet they're very sensitive. They differentiate. The moment they will feel some kind of a sense or presence, they will bark. Otherwise, they are just quiet. If I may use the word Sachidananda. But human beings are busy chattering about all the things, gossiping, rather than, this wonderful place. So you have this seeking mind. It's about the mind. Assuring God's self-cowled neutrality, a mighty opposition conquered space. So the divine allowed. We read that poem the other day, how divine allows even the Rakshasa to emerge. People often ask this question, why Krishna has to, he could have easily killed Kansa. He did so many miracles as a child. He killed so many Rakshasas. He should have just killed Kansa the moment he was born. But he allows him to grow until a point where he collapses by his own weight. But as he collapses, like the velamen of something embryo, then the new thing emerges out of it. So if he would have destroyed Kansa immediately, then where would have been the birth of aspiration? So he allows aspiration to grow. So when the aspiration grows and grows and grows, a time comes when this womb of darkness must burst out. Because that is the right time. As mother puts it in another place, each fruit has its right season. So if you take it out of season, like chick is inside the egg, but you have to allow the time for it to develop. If you do it prematurely, then you don't get a chick, you get just omelette. So the divine doesn't want to have an omelette, he wants the chick to emerge. So that's why, God was neutral and this opposition conquered space.
Self-cowled.
Self-cowled.
Puts
He was hidden.
Puts a cowl over his head.
Yes. A sovereign ruling falsehood, death and grief, it pressed its fierce hegemony on the earth, disharmonizing the original style of the architecture of our fate's design. It falsified the primal cosmic will, and bound to struggle and dread vicissitudes, the long, slow process of the patient power. So that's where the catch took place, that's where the distortion took place. Otherwise, life would have blossomed beautifully. It seems that at one level, you sense that it is not the original plan. At another level, you sense that, it has been allowed because eventually the result would be far more satisfying. So this is how it appears, that it distorted the original style. What is the original style? You see, when there is nothing but matter. Implanting error in the stuff of things, it made an ignorance of the all-wise law. It baffled the sure touch of life's hid sense, kept dumb the intuitive guide in matter's sleep, deformed the insect's instinct and the brute's, disfigured man's thought-born humanity. So there are several examples that come here. You see, in nature, in biology, for example, you have these mutations. Now, it's a very strange thing, very difficult to understand mutations. Most of the time, the genetic material and the DNA will go along the fixed pattern. So, you put a seed and the plant will grow. But then there would be some genes which will mutate. Now, most of these mutations are harmful. And nature has a tendency to destroy it or abort. So in a child, if you have, in the womb, if there are mutations which lead to, deformed child, most of the time nature tries to throw it out. This is a natural tendency of nature. But out of million mutations, one mutation will create a genius. So he'll be like an overleaping matter. overleaping that species, and that's how nature is also evolved. If you look at it from another perspective, mutation, which is like a seeming error, has at another level created another kind of balance or creation in, imagine if there were no errors in human body, no errors, each cell was replicating itself perfectly, which it should.
Yes.
So there would have been no old age and possibly no death once we would have conquered the causes of diseases. No genetic error. But because there are errors, you see that eventually there is old age, decline, and death, even if there were no diseases. But they keep another level, the balance of the universe, the same death which is born out of that. So these errors serve a purpose. But they came in, they destroyed you see, again, she's speaking of insects. This also has been very interestingly was asked to mother.
I have a lot to say on that too. Please, you go
Yeah,
first.
please, because what I'm going to say is something very drastic.
Okay,
So-
all right. Well, this was in the early days of the Matrimondia Gardens. Huh? And we would plant beautiful things, and every insect in the area knew it was a banquet. And they
Yes.
would wipe out everything.
Yes.
So I wrote to mother and I asked this question: is there a conscious ill will in insects to destroy things? And mother wrote back, it is not like that. Insects do good and they do bad. They pollinate fruit. And so
Yeah,
I
they can.
understood from that in nature there's still this balance. And mother showed that.
So similar question Satprem asked in another context. So he said, he was very troubled by the fact that, things don't move the way they should happen. There are disturbances, human beings and all this. There's a beautiful garden. He gives the example. And he
yes.
says that, if insects come and destroy it. So mother said, how do you know that that's not going to eventually help? So he is totally taken aback. He says that, but they are, this principle of freedom. I wish it was not given because, they are destroying the whole garden. So mother says, you go in nature and see. So she gave the same example. Say, you may feel like that with a limited consciousness. But if you see the gardens in nature, eventually it's something very rich.
Yes.
So then she gave an example that, when she was a child, there was a place which was not kept well at all, because nobody was caring about the place. And it was growing wild. So people, would generally not go there because, it's a very ill-kept place. And then she said after many years, one day, there was a little door and she opened. As she entered, it was beauty in another way. It was wild. But the beauty which was created just by nature through the principle of freedom, where insects could destroy, there is a whole cycle and there is a whole movement.
Yeah.
So that's how this, straight instinct of the insect. Here we are just told this part that, they also destroy things which may not have happened, but they do it. Similarly with human beings, thought-born humanity, disfigured.
I have
which-
one more thing.
Yes.
Alok. This is most interesting because it's a flower
Yes,
that mother has named inspiration.
yes,
It attracts a fly to be pollinated.
yes.
So the fly comes in, but the hairs are bent this way,
Right.
and the fly can't get out.
Oh.
So it flies around, pollinating like anything. 3 days later, the hairs lie down and the fly goes out.
My God, look at it, how nature works.
Consciousness.
So inspiration spreads far and wide. Yeah. A shadow fell across the simple ray. Obscured was the truth light in the caven heart that burns unwitnessed in the altar crypt. Behind the still velament's secrecy, companioning the Godhead of the shrine. So it's about the psychic and the mind which comes in and intervenes. And this mother has spoken of it several places. And she says that, it's true that the coming of man has been like a fall. She says the early human being, the primitive humanity was different because it still had the straight instincts. It could act from the fullness of the soul. But later the mind came with all its ifs and buts and good and bad and all kinds of dualities. So the straight response was lost. But then she says that eventually, ultimately, when you have crossed the curve and you go to the next level, ascend beyond the mind, then of course it's a far, far more powerful and rich creation. Those who have the faith, who have gone beyond the rational mind, who have their developed intellect and a rational mind, and yet are burning with faith. That's a much greater thing. But then in the middle there is a passage which is truly like a fall. And she gives several examples of, constructions, architecture, all that human beings have created, and, the selfies and whatnot. So, not to speak the least, I keep seeing and I say, what is this, with motorcycles, suddenly somebody stands on the road with pictures. You're hardly enjoying the joy and beauty of nature, even going around the ocean. It's so inspiring, but we lose all that. It's like mind makes us narrow and shut inside a small shell. And yet mankind has to go through this passage. Thus was the dire antagonist energy born, who mimes the eternal mother's mighty shape and mocks the luminous infinity with a grey, distorted silhouette in the night. So she comes to imitate. Arresting the passion of the climbing soul, she forced on life a slow and faltering pace. See, if human beings could directly leap with faith in the divine, but they don't. They start, becoming, every step they take, they start questioning, thinking, what will happen, what will be the consequences. At one place he says that, that's one of the big difficulties. He says, when you come to yoga, you should be willing to take a leap. Yeah. And then, don't worry, because, you may fall, your head, she says all that. You may fall on your head. Doesn't matter, you take a leap. So the disciple asks a very pragmatic question. He says, Mother, but with the ocean, you can actually see the ocean. Because he gives the example of the ocean.
Yes.
Says, yes, of course, my child, you must have at least some idea of the divine. So by seeing, he says, yes, I am not saying that just blindly jump, but some idea of the divine. But once you have it, then take the leap. But the mind would not allow, the life instincts would not allow, the sense of self-preservation would not allow.
She even says, without worrying about hitting the rocks on
the
bottom.
That's what.
The one.
And she says there comes a time when you have to hang only with faith.
Yeah.
Nothing else.
Was that one year we had, blessed are those who take a leap towards the future.
Yes. Her hands deflecting and retarding weight is laid on the mystic evolution's curve. But again you see it's something very interesting, that as it deflects, it ends up making the design or God's doodle, which this world is, even more intricate. That's one way. Like when ink had spilt over a child's frock and the child went to the mother. Not the frock, on something she was carrying, I think some card or something. So this child was crying. Mother asked, why are you crying? Oh, ink has spilled. She said, come, let us see. So, the ink was still fresh. So she started, using her finger to make a pattern out of it. And at the end of it, she made such a beautiful pattern out of the spilt ink that the child began smiling. So it reminds us of the creation where there are deviations, there are deflections, but the divine turns everything into a more enriching experience, and the creation becomes very vast and complex. So in one sense, it brings the infinity which is within. But the difficulty is the more complex it becomes, the more difficulty in harmonizing it. This is the problem which, mother faced even in the ashram. She said every time a new person comes, it means new possibilities as well as new difficulties. Yes. And yet she would take it now with the rest of it to integrate and harmonize. It's not easy because it's a totally new thing. The tortuous line of a deceiving mind, the gods see not and man is impotent. Oppressing the God spark within the soul, she forces back to the beast the human fall. Why? Because something is not ready. There is the beast hidden inside, it draws out the beast and forces to the beast the human fall. And several times, several approximations, until we cross that line. Yet in her formidable instinctive mind, she feels the one grow in the heart of time and sees the immortal shine through the human mold. So, through all this process, some work is done, and this darkness slowly gets transmuted more and more into shades of grey towards the light. Now comes the practical part. That why all this is important, why should we know all this? Because those who are turned to yoga, especially those who have love for Mother has spoken of it. The other day we were reading also what Pranabda says.
Yes.
They are the ones mostly who become the target of the adverse forces. They attack them most. Because others are anyways under their reign. And I give this example of Vibhishna in Ravana's court. Ravana was making, gold houses for everybody. But to Vibhishna he gave a kick. When he gave a kick, when he says Rama is the Lord. Same thing we see with Prahlad and Hiranyakashipu. So all these stories are essentially that as long as you are conforming to the ways of darkness, they don't mind. When Bharati Di went to Vellore Hospital and Mother said, she doesn't like the atmosphere of hospitals. So the disciple says, but she is quite comfortable there. She says, yes, some people are in harmony with that atmosphere. So, because she was a nurse or something like that before, says some people are in harmony with that atmosphere, they're quite comfortable there. And then she speaks about it, how these forces are ever on the watch when we are growing and how they can pull us, these adverse forces.
But as you say, they want the more evolved, the
more
aspiring.
They catch that, yes. So here comes, alarmed for her rule and full of fear and rage, she prowls around each light that gleams through the dark, casting its ray from the spirit's lonely tent, hoping to enter with fierce, stealthy tread and in the cradle slay the divine child. So we grew up with this story, but we didn't know what it means. When Krishna is born, one of the first danger he faces is from Putana. Putana assumes the form of Krishna's mother and is sent by Kansa to slay Krishna. And he comes as a mother who would feed the baby. And she feeds the baby with poison-tainted breasts. So it's a very symbolic story. She comes to slay the divine child in the cradle. But the child ends up growing stronger and destroys Putana, because Krishna is the symbol of the psychic being. Mother has spoken of that. But they attempt, because the moment they see a little light growing, that's when they attack the aspirant. Incalculable are her strength and ruse. Her touch is a fascination and a death. She kills her victim with his own delight. Even good she makes a hook to drag to hell. So we have spoken of this, how Karna, the sense of goodness, generosity, fidelity to a friend, which are very high qualities. She made a hook to drag him to the precipice and the hell. Yeah. So they can use even good, trying to help. So many letters of Mother and Sri Aurobindo where the disciple says, so and so wants my help, should I give? So some places Sri Aurobindo would say, all right, help means in things like, wants to learn English or something. Some places he would say yes, other places he would say no. Because he saw this help is one of the ways that one will get hooked and will be dragged. So I'm not going into the details of the stories, but there are plenty of them. For her the world runs to its agony. And look at this, that she kills the victim with his own delight. You see, drugs, pleasure, it drags us to the precipice, and we don't realize that how it is finishing us from within. I mean, those who are conscious do realize, but otherwise. Often the pilgrim on the eternal's road, ill-lit from clouds by the pale moon of mind, or in devious byways wandering alone, or lost in deserts where no path is seen, falls overpowered by her lion leap, a conquered captive under her dreadful paws. So this again, there is the Sphinx which guards the gates of eternity, the divine Sphinx. And there is its counterpart, the nether Sphinx, who guards the pathways to hell, to darkness. And she waits for the pilgrim on the road, and how she overpowers and leaps, that we are seeing here. Now, here Sri Aurobindo is indicating what is the safety. Those who try to practice yoga only from the mind, who do not allow the psychic emergence, and who want to just do it all by themselves, devious ways, trying, experimenting this, experimenting that, this is the real danger. That's why the need of master, fidelity to the master, and to bring out the psychic as soon as possible, they keep us safe. Otherwise, it's so easy to be dragged away. And dragged away far.
Yes.
Though it's different that the divine never leaves. See what happened to Dilip Kumar Roy, and after all this love.
Yeah.
And imagine of all the people, Krishna Prem, who had this capacity, he tells him, yes, you feel that, Indra Devi, she is the one who has come to help you in the process, and yes, you must follow. He didn't stop him. And he went with her.
Yeah.
Much later he regretted, he understood. And he would start inquiring about mother, and he would say, I know she is, full of compassion. And when he went for the relics installation in Mumbai as well as in Kolkata, he was asked to speak. He was such an erudite person. And he just couldn't speak a word but cried, just saying, my Lord, my Lord, my Lord. Knowing, which way things have turned. So it is so important, and because he was so close.
Yes.
And so, one has to pass through all these things. And then particularly through the sexual door, which is the most dangerous of all. Intoxicated by a burning breath and amorous groan of a destroying mouth, once a companion of the sacred fire, the mortal perishes to God and light. An adversary governs heart and brain, in nature hostile to the mother force. So here we must know the difference between love and sexual relationship. But also with the caveat that it's so easy for emotional love to degrade into passion and still lower down, because they are so closely connected even in the human biology and in the evolutionary process. And that can be really fatal. So Sri Aurobindo cautions us, and to what extent, that the mortal can perish to God and light once a companion of the sacred fire. Such is the danger. The self of life yields up its instruments to titan and demonic agencies that aggrandize earth, nature, and disframe. A cowed fifth columnist is now thought's guide. His subtle defeatist murmur slays the faith. See, this fifth columnist is in battle. You have the last, those who are not fighters. They are full of fear. So they are hiding behind, and their task is to, just the supplies, etc.
Basically spies too.
Yeah. Now they become the guide.
Yeah.
They are not warriors. So they are full of doubts, full of fears, full of suspicion. And here I have seen people, Classic example is one person whom mother had even given the blessing packet, Superman, and he had such fantastic opening, and mother had only told him about one thing, that don't get into sexual relationship with a woman. And till date he laments, he says, I just couldn't follow that advice. And after that his mind, till date he keeps on experiencing these hostile suggestions and voices. But because mother's touch is there, he knows they are hostile attacks. Every morning he will say, the hostile force was telling me this, but I am not listening to it. I said, very good, don't listen to it. And such a restless person, but in Savitri session he will come and sit and become suddenly quiet. And after that he'll go. Such is the magic of Savitri. A person who just cannot concentrate on anything. But half an hour Savitri session, he will come, sit quietly, all his restlessness will cease. And then again, the moment it's over, after a few minutes, he'll tell me that, again I got that suggestion from the hostiles, and I'm not going to listen. Isn't it all right? I said, yes, very good. I have kept telling him that don't talk about these forces, talk about mother, think of mother. He says, yes, thank you. But that's it. So, it's a real danger. And lost in the breast or whispering from outside, a lying inspiration fell and dark, a new order substitutes for the divine. We'll quickly read these lines so that we finish. A silence falls upon the spirit's heights. From the veiled sanctuary, the god retires. Empty and cold is the chamber of the bride. The golden nimbus now is seen no more. Sometimes the psychic being can leave such people. And heart becomes cold, incapable of love, incapable of warmth. And, it retires because psychic being is different. But the rest of the being, the frame remains. No longer burns the white spiritual ray, and hushed forever is the secret voice. Then by the angel of the vigil tower, a name is struck from the recording book. A flame that sang in heaven sinks, quenched and mute. Look at the word, quenched. And it's mute because it precipitous fall. And the gods had written the names, he is one of us. And suddenly the gods say, no more.
Strike the name.
The name is struck. In ruin ends the epic of his soul. This is the tragedy of the inner death, when forfeited is the divine element, and only a mind and body live to die. So it's so important, Mother says, you must guard your faith and aspiration as the most precious thing, most invaluable treasure. Because anything that attacks it, and I have seen people who have, been carried away and in a moment of darkness. So these are the dangers. And yet, of course, there is a purpose and reason, but that's a different story altogether. Right now, it's a word of caution, the need for vigilance against these forces which prowl, especially against those who are pilgrims of the light. These are the inner terrorists of inner life who are waiting for the least guarded, or rather least unguarded moment to attack and finish. Need for vigilance.